The Houston Cougars enter the Big 12 this fall, and at least one Houston Cougar ought to be really, really familiar with their upcoming guest and the West Virginia Mountaineers. But let's jump in.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, to break down all things Cougs. And today, I'm joined by YouTube's own Justin Couz Walker, who represents West Virginia Mountaineers this afternoon. Couz, I got to ask, I don't see where Couz fits into Justin and Walker, so you got to walk me through that one.
No problem, man. Definitely not the first time I've been asked. I don't know if you're familiar with a basketball player from, I guess it's the 1960s named Bob Cousy. He's a Hall of Famer, played for the Boston Celtics. That's where it originates from. It started out as Cousy. Somebody at basketball practice in the 7th grade called me Bob Cousy, and it got shortened to Couz at some point along the way. And here I am, literally 30 years later, and it stuck. So that's what my wife calls me. So that's pretty much
that. Well, that really is stuck. Now I gotta admit, I wouldn't have watched Bob Cousy play basketball once upon a time. I'm not quite that old. I feel like that's a pretty good basketball player to be nicknamed after, right?
It is. I'm trying to figure out if they were making fun of me or if I was doing something good. I haven't figured that part out yet, but at this point in my life, who really cares, right?
Definitely. Hey, that's a good one. All right, today we're going to be previewing, kind of getting acquainted with West Virginia and Houston, going back and forth a little bit, because while Dana Holgerson knows both programs very well, and maybe a couple of players here and there do, honestly, we had never really gotten into super competitive football games back and forth. And this fall, we do meet on October 12th. That's a Thursday night in Houston. And so as we're in the summer, kind of getting ready for the Big 12 this fall and make sure we're all getting to know one another. First, though, Houston is a part of this big initial expansion wave of the Big 12. West Virginia was like that roughly a decade ago. Am I right? Maybe 12 years ago at this point. Right. What was it like in your first couple of years in the conference? What was being that expansion team like?
Oh, it was exciting, man. Very exciting. I remember, the Big East was falling apart. All of our conference mates, the football conference mates, were all leaving. Most of them had already left. We were needing a home. We were kind of clamoring for obvious reasons because that's where most of our conference mates went. We were clamoring for the ACC. That didn't work out. Next thing you know, all of our luck announces we're going to the Big 12. We found out we're going to play Texas and Oklahoma every year. That was exciting. Didn't know a whole lot about the rest of the conference. No offense to them, but everybody knew Texas and Oklahoma, right? So we were very excited about it, and it was a new adventure for us, man. We knew we were going to play a very tough schedule. We knew it was going to be tough sledding to start, but it was very exciting, man. So I can sense that's probably how Houston, Cincinnati, BYU, and UCF fans probably feel right now.
Definitely. And it's also funny because there's all this talk this summer about is someone else going to be joining too in the near future, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it is exciting, especially for Houston. The old Southwest Conference rivalries are kind of still there. There's certainly the water cooler rivalries for work on Monday mornings. Talk to us some about your version or your interpretation of the Dana Holgerson experience. It's kind of been a roller coaster at Houston. Crazy successful 2021. Most would argue a disappointing 2022. Y'all had him for a minute there, and you kind of had your highs and lows too.
Yep, roller coaster rides, perfect way to put it. He started off, his first year we were still in the Big East. We win the Big East, win the Orange Bowl, blow Clemson out in the Orange Bowl. Future looks bright. We're all walking on cloud nine. Think he's going to be the next great coach. We start the next year in the Big 12. We start out 5-0. We're 2-0 in the Big 12. We had just beaten Texas. We're ranked in the top 10, I believe, at the time. Geno was in the Heisman race. We finished the year 7-5. So, it's just, and then I think we had a losing season the following year, and we basically averaged 7 to 8 wins a year. Ended with that 2018 fiasco where we were ranked in the top 10, a chance to play for the Big 12 title. We lose 2 games in a row, back-to-back, one to a Oklahoma State team, who at the time had a losing record, I think, which was a huge disappointment, and then only lose by Oklahoma by 3. I mean, it was just roller coaster is the best way to put it, man. I don't know how else to describe it.
So, and obviously Holgorsen left after that year, came to Houston. Talk us through what you're looking at in terms of West Virginia this fall. Who are the names Houston Cougar fans should be prepared to hear about? What is the outlook on this fall? Who's going to star on the field for West Virginia this fall?
First name that comes to mind is a running back named C.J. Donaldson. He was a freshman phenom, so to speak, last year. He came into West Virginia recruited as a tight end last year as a true freshman. Was in the tight end room to start camp. One of our running backs, Lynn J. Dixon, leaves the team. They needed to fill the spot. It was too late to get anybody out of the portal. They had seen CJ with the ball in his hands and liked what they saw, so they decided to give it a shot. The kid had never played running back in his life. His first carry from scrimmage against Pitt, at Pitt, he goes for like 25 yards. And from then on, he ended up rushing for over 500 yards last year, and he sat out. I think he missed 3 games with an injury. So he's 6'2", 6'3", weighs about 245 pounds. Just a big man. But he's the one we're really looking out for this year to have a big year. And then sticking to that side of the ball, we've got our quarterback battle between Garrett Green and Nico Marchiol. We don't know who's going to come out of that the winner. Garrett Green looked the best in the spring game. He's the one with the most experience. Obviously, he had a couple starts under his belt last year when JT Daniels got benched. Beat Oklahoma. Played decent in a loss against Kansas State. Gets injured in our win over Oklahoma State, where Nico came in and finished it out for us. Nico's being a redshirt freshman, 4-star kid that we're really high on. So we don't know yet, what's going to come of that. We do think the offense is going to look much different this year as far as a lot more RPO, a lot more quarterback run stuff, because this is the first year that Neil Brown's had a running quarterback. So, and both of those guys can run. So regardless of who starts. And then defensively, kind of a crapshoot, man. That's really where we struggled the most last year. But I would say Sean Martin, number 91 on the defensive line, is the guy you can look out for. He's 6'4", weighs right around 285, 290. Just a massive dude. He's a West Virginia guy too. Lives right down the road from me, actually. So I'm a fan. He's obviously a fan favorite for me for obvious reasons. So look out for him. And then Lee Koba was a leading tackler at the linebacker spot last year. Was a JUCO kid last year. He's got 1 year of experience under his belt, so I expect him to have a breakout year. And then Aubrey Burks, who's a safety who Pro Football Focus rated as the second highest graded returning safety in the country based on their metrics. So we're really excited about him as well.
Safety on the roster, I'm looking here, they identify some of these positions as bandit. And while I think I know what that means, that's a really intimidating name for a position. Mm-hmm. Is that like a rover, like a guy that plays kind of a multitude of positions on the defense side of the ball? Or when I see that Tara Simmons is a 6'2", 248-pound bandit, what does that mean?
That's basically we play a 3-3-5 type defense. So the bandit it's more of a linebacker, but they usually line up. It's more like an outside linebacker / defensive end, basically. They stand up, but they usually line up on the end of the line. And their job is basically to rush the quarterback. And that is actually one position where West Virginia has not gotten production out of like they should have. And it may be the most important position on the defense, to be honest, because obviously when you're playing at when you only have 3 down linemen, it's hard to get pressure with just 3 guys. So it's very important for that bandit spot to get pressure, and we've not done that consistently over the last 4 years. So hopefully we get more production out of that spot this year.
Yeah, it's just interesting. It's a hybrid position. The 3-3-5 defense, I don't want to make it sound gimmicky. It takes advantage of some things and leaves some other things open, right? It's you can't cover everything, and a 3-3-5 it uses speed and deception in a way that's interesting to see. You mentioned the big running back come back. It's funny you say I didn't realize he had been a tight end in the past, because his height, weight, speed all looks like that more hybrid tight end type guy. He had 500 yards a year ago. Are you thinking it's another 500-yard season? We're pushing more close to 750. What do you anticipate?
A lot of it's going to depend on his health, and it's also going to because he did get injured a couple times last year because he wasn't used to taking that kind of pounding. He played receiver and tight end in high school.
Yeah.
So he just didn't, and I don't know that he knew how to protect his body the right way as a freshman. So a lot of it's going to depend on that. And then also we've got 3 or 4 other backs that could potentially carry the ball quite a bit. We could end up using a running back by committee, which, I'm sure you may talk about this later, but it's one of the reasons Tony Mathis, I think, ended up landing, at your doorstep there at Houston was it's the deepest room on the team at West Virginia. We're not expected to compete for a Big 12 title, but one position I do have a lot of faith in is the running backs. And he's going to share a lot of carries with Jalen Anderson and even with Justin Johnson more than likely this year.
Coogs House. All right, so we got to take a quick break from talking about the Houston Cougars and this fall and all of the fun that is in store. To talk about all of the fun that is in store for you at FanDuel.com. Now go to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now to get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. I'm telling you right now, it's the summertime. That means it's baseball season. That means it's time to look at the Houston Astros. And you and I both know that our Houston Astros are atop of everything and feel like a sure lock to go back-to-back World Series champs. I mean, whether it's Corey Julks hitting out of the park for grand slams or Yordan Alvarez on his MVP campaign, they've got Houston at plus 700 to win the World Series. I'm thinking that's worth it. Now, admittedly, that's fairly high. They've got the Dodgers at plus 450, the Braves at plus 470, and the Tampa Bay Rays at plus 550. But at plus 700, I'm taking Houston each and every time. And I'm telling you to take it at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and get your no sweat first bet in today. Well, it's interesting. Houston landed Tony Mathis, who's one of honestly, a handful of guys that have West Virginia in their past coming into Houston out of this year or in the past. They landed Tony Mathis shortly after Alton McCaskill decided to leave.
Right.
And I think Houston fans were hopeful that he could fill those shoes. McCaskill was a 16 touchdown guy as a freshman that missed his sophomore year with an ACL injury, and then now is one of those darn Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, Colorado Buffalo.
Right.
What can you tell us about Tony Mathis? Did he get any run there at West Virginia to speak of, or was he kind of, like I said, stuck in a crowded room?
Both. I mean, he got run. He was a backup behind Letty Brown for 2 years. Letty, back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons. When it was his turn last year, he did okay. I mean, he ran. He was our leading rusher. Ran for close to 600 yards. Had some really good moments. Had a couple 100-yard games, but he just never really took that next step, man. Never made it to that next level as a running back. And unfortunately, I think guys like C.J. Donaldson, Jalen Anderson, no offense to Tony's a fantastic young man. I love him to death. I wish him nothing but the best at Houston, except for that one night when we come to town. He's a great kid, or great young man, I should say. Worked his tail off at West Virginia. He's got a degree from West Virginia. He'll always be a Mountaineer to me. But I think those other guys are more physically talented than he is. Just to be frank, I think he just kind of. And he would have gotten some snaps. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like he was going to be relegated to the bench, but he was not going to be the number one guy anymore. So that might be a reason why he decided to move on. Yeah,
it looks like so he has the COVID year left, right?
Correct.
But it looks like he's got a lot more run in his 2021, 2022 seasons. But even then, it's obviously sharing carries and that kind of stuff. I just say that Houston was in dire need of a running back when he showed up. So I hope that we wear that home, like you're saying, for some snaps for him. As we transition some in the second segment a little bit, I got to ask, outside of Dana Holgerson type things, because y'all actually know him fairly well, what kinds of questions do West Virginia folks have about Houston, this new school? Frankly, unlike a lot of the Big 12, it's a big city school, right? Like, what do people ask about Houston when you're talking to the fans?
One of the biggest things is, what are Houston's fans? What are your all's thoughts on Dana? I mean, or what's the temperature in Houston around Dana Holgerson and his performance as head
Man,
coach
that
of the
depends on the
Cougars.
day. So I appreciate that he can call an offense. I think having a guy like Tank Dell last year, who was a 3rd round pick, Houston Texans now. Great to see the kids stay home. But having him catch 17 touchdowns when everyone knew he was getting the dang football is really important, because that means that schematically you're still opening him up even when the defense has all eyes on him, right? Yeah. I don't want to overlook that as far as what Dana does well. What Dana doesn't do well is talk to folks like you and me. What Dana doesn't do well is, like, at one point last season, Houston was the most penalized team in college football. Oh, yeah. And there'd been some, like, offsides penalties or false start, like mental fart kind of things. And he was like, well, that's not my problem. They know what they're supposed to do. And everyone's like, then whose problem is it, Dana? Those kinds of moments are where people get upset with Dana. And I think rightfully so. Like, some of that is a maturity thing, and you got to, publicly speak well to be a head coach versus a coordinator and that kind of stuff. I will say, unlike other programs in this expansion era of the Big 12, his success at West Virginia, relatively speaking, winning records, multiple seasons and all that kind of stuff. Stedman Bailey had a crazy couple runs there. Has me encouraged about Houston moving in the Big 12, right? If I had a coach that had never coached in a Power 5 conference, I'd be a little worried, where Houston has Dana or Central Florida has Malzahn, right? Like, a little bit more experience.
Yeah, that's pretty much dead on the money. As far as a West Virginia fan perspective, Dana's never going to be the best recruiter. It's not his strength. But he can call an offense as good as anybody in the business. And guys like to play for him. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, we've got 4 or 5 guys who transferred from West Virginia to go to Houston. Why do you think that is? Because they like Dana's style of coaching. He's a little bit more loose. I think he gives the guys a lot more freedom, from what I've heard from some, just through channels in Morgantown, out of Morgantown. Neil Brown's a lot more buttoned up. I think he keeps his guys on a lot tighter leash, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And got a lot of guys don't like that. A lot of guys like Dana's style of coaching better. So, but like you said, the undisciplined play, the antics on the sidelines, which didn't bother me, but I know our university president, I don't think, liked it very much. The media didn't like him. So he was not well liked by everybody in West Virginia, but I can tell you what, if you ask me today, would I rather have Dana Holgerson or Neil Brown? I'd pick Dana Holgerson.
I have to say, Houston, I appreciate you saying that, because I feel like online I'm battling with a lot of Houston Cougar folks that would rather have someone else. I'm like, no, like 330 schools in America would love to have Dana.
Now, he in all honesty, Dana's probably, I don't know that he'll ever win a Big 12 title. And no offense, I just don't know that maybe he will one day. He has a better chance to do it at Houston, probably, because, like I said, at West Virginia, you've got to be an ace recruiter, because we don't have a lot of homegrown talent here. And matter of fact, he even mentioned that in an interview with Sports Illustrated when he left, which has us all hating him now, because he said he couldn't win a Big 12 title here because he can't recruit in West Virginia or at West Virginia. So he's in a perfect place for that. He don't have to recruit. He can sit in his office and pick up the phone and get guys from right down the street. So that alone might lead him to winning a Big 12 title. But if you're going to rely on him to recruit, it's probably not going to happen. And that's one of the reasons I don't know that he was a good fit for us, to be honest.
Well, and I will say, the recruiting hotbed that is Houston, I don't think his seat is particularly hot right now, but give it a couple years, and if he's not winning games, it's like, well, why? You got all the resources in the world, and you're in the city, and all that kind of stuff.
But would they be willing to fire Tillman Fertitta's friend, because they're personal friends?
It would take a couple years of disappointment. I don't think it's anytime soon, if I'm being honest, Couz. Right. I think it would take some disappointment. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the matchup. What kinds of things are West Virginia fans looking forward to in the matchup coming up?
Number one, we're really pissed off that it's not happening in Morgantown. The Big 12 and ESPN or whoever, Fox, whoever, missed a huge opportunity there to have Dana Holgerson returning to his old stomping grounds in a night game in front of a sold-out crowd, potentially. Missed a huge opportunity, in my opinion. But that being said, we are excited to see him on the schedule, because we all do want to beat Dana for obvious reasons. He left us for Houston. So we want to beat them. So we're excited about the matchup. We hate that it's in Houston, but it is what it is. We're excited about having Houston in the league for multiple reasons. That being the big one. We're obviously, I know we're talking about football right now, but we're really excited to have Houston in as a basketball member because their basketball program is top notch, one of the best in the country. Obviously, you guys being in the state of Texas keeps us our footprint there as a conference. So a lot of positives, man. And Houston, one of those programs that kind of got left out of the Power Five shuffle, back when the Big 12 formed in the mid 90s, probably for political reasons, from what I understand. Yeah. And it's kind of good to see them kind of get back where they belong, so to speak. That's kind of how we see it.
Yeah, I think it's you mentioned the political reasons. I think there's a burnt orange school in Austin that has something to do with that. Although people in Austin will tell you it was a green and gold school in Waco, so it might have been both. But I'm excited to play this game in Houston. It's interesting. It fits right for Houston so they play Texas Tech at the end of September, have a bye week, play West Virginia, and then play Texas the next week. So in a span of like 3 weeks, they play, or like 4 weeks, they play those 3 games, kind of well spread out at a pretty crucial point in the season for the University of Houston. Houston's got a bit of a quarterback battle happening right now, so I wish I could tell you more about how that's going to shape out by the time we get to that game. We got Donovan Smith, who was at Texas Tech last year. Do you remember if when y'all played Texas Tech, was Donovan Smith the starter at that point?
I think they've had a different starter every time we've played them, to be honest with you, because their guys keep getting hurt. They've had Donovan Smith. They've had Tyler Shuck. They've had 3 or 4. I don't even remember them all at this point. I mean, it's been like a different guy every year. But nonetheless, whoever it is beats us, so it doesn't matter.
Well, I was going to ask because in doing these Big 12 previews, some people have seen up close and personal Donovan Smith. He's a 6'5", 240. He runs the ball well, runs over guys, runs the ball well. Yeah. But he can be a little turnover prone. And then when I look at like the other option, is this kid named Lucas Coley, who was originally an Arkansas kid, never got any time on the field there though. Came to Houston in the spring of 22, so he kind of knows the system a little bit better. He's a shorter, squattier kind of guy, like 6'1", 6'2". It's just a different type of athlete. So I wish I could tell you more about who's going to be on the field for us at quarterback. But y'all have your own quarterback battle. It sounds like.
Right.
Can I ask you a question about last year's quarterback?
Yeah, sure.
JT Daniels. We play him second game of the season, I believe, at Rice.
If he starts.
So you say him transferring to Rice blew my mind. Did that shake up West Virginia like it shook us up?
We couldn't have cared less. I mean, I've never seen a quarterback decline in his performance in one season by that much in my entire life. Our first game of the year against Pitt, even though we lost the game, he played fantastic. I mean, he looked like an NFL quarterback to me. By the Iowa State game, which we lost, unfortunately, he couldn't throw the ball 15 yards and hit a guy in the numbers. He was throwing it into the ground. He was overthrowing guys. I mean, he ended up getting benched for Garrett Green. I mean, about 3 or 4 games left in the season. It was just unbelievable to see the regression that he made from game 1 down to game 8 or 9, whatever it was. It's like he got a little bit worse every game. And by the end of the year, he couldn't even throw it in the ocean. I mean, it was uncanny, to be honest with you.
Well, that's not encouraging because we play him week 2, so that sounds like the hot part of the year for him. I just, A, didn't know he had more eligibility, and then B, this can be it's not a Power 5 school, but it's going to be a 4th university in 5 years for the kid. Just wild to see that. I mean, I remember hearing about him taking the field at USC, right? Like that was like, is he going to be the next great USC guy?
Yeah. I mean, his talent is through the roof. He just hasn't been able, between injuries and whatever happened to him last year, he hasn't been able to put it together. And I don't know if it's maybe he didn't have enough talent around him. I don't know if there was something going on mentally. I mean, his mechanics looked off. I mean, it was just bad. And I have nothing against him. He seems like a great young man. He's extremely intelligent. If you've ever listened to one of his post-game press conferences, he can break down a play better than any coach I've ever heard. I mean, he's He's extremely smart. Obviously, he's going to Rice, so you have to
Well,
be
and
pretty smart to go to Rice. But
going to Rice, and I would imagine at this point in his career, not looking at the NFL after Rice, right? Like looking at
who
a
knows?
more normal career, and that requires going to class. And Rice is not an easy place to
Yeah,
go to
no,
school.
he's a very smart guy, and from what I understand and what I've heard through channels is he's wanting to be a psychiatrist or something like that. So I think he does have high aspirations. If he doesn't make the NFL, I think he does have pretty high expectations outside of football. So and he'll be successful in life. I have no doubt about it. But for whatever reason, as a quarterback last year, he regressed big time. There could have been things going on inside the locker room, that we're not aware of as fans. But whatever it was, his performance really, really regressed over the course of the season, and it was shocking because we didn't expect that. Man, we thought we hit a home run. We thought we were going to be a 9-10 win team because of him,
Yeah.
But it just didn't pan out that way, unfortunately.
Well, and so talk to me some. You mentioned 9 or 10 win hopes last year. It obviously didn't quite work out like that. But this fall, so our buddies at FanDuel have Houston set over under at 4.5 wins, and my campaign has been that is ridiculously low. I think it's ridiculously low for a number of reasons, but for one, and now maybe you're talking me out of the Rice game because JT Daniels, but Houston opens up with UTSA, Rice, and Sam Houston State as their non-conference games. Technically, they got TCU in the middle there but that's a conference game. But the 3 non-conference games all seem very, very winnable to me for a Power 5 team, especially. UTSA is a growing program, and frankly, it might be a whole different team in a couple years than they are right now, but I think that's a win. And then you've got games like Texas Tech. Houston took to overtime last year, right? West Virginia be a fun, competitive environment on Thursday night. I think of Oklahoma State as being down. Houston's got Cincinnati at home and UCF. That's both two teams that are kind of like Houston in this. I think there's a lot of 50-50 games. I think there's too many 50-50 games, at minimum 50-50, for Houston to not feel fairly confident about winning more than 5 games. I got to ask, how do you feel about West Virginia's being set at 5.5? How do you feel looking at next season with a 5.5 win total? Does that seem low, high, on the mark?
For me, 5.5 is pretty much probably about on the mark for West Virginia to me. My prediction, I haven't went through a game by game breakdown yet, which I'll do eventually on my channel, but I'm probably looking at 6 to 7 wins ballpark. Our schedule is extremely tough. We don't have those. We're not like, no offense, but we don't have UTSA and Rice. We have Penn State and Pitt. So, it's our schedule is tough. We're going to have to, we're going to have to win some games we're not supposed to win just to get to a bowl game. And so I think 5.5 is pretty much dead on the money. Now, some of the other outlets out there have us at 4.5, which I think is way too low. But 5.5 is probably fair to me. Now, I am surprised that at Houston's 4.5. I'm like, actually, when you first mentioned that to me, I thought 4.5 was actually fair for Houston. But then when you told me their non-conference schedule, I'm like, if they can't, they'll win. I think they'll win more than one Big 12 game. I mean, surely.
Exactly. If Houston opened up with Penn State and had Pitt and things, I'd be talking a whole lot different too, Couz. I got to ask, you open with Penn State, right? And then have Pitt as your second or third game?
Third game, right? We have Duquesne and FCS school sandwiched in the middle.
Okay, so that's a win. But those are both regional rivalries for y'all, right?
Yes.
Penn State and Pittsburgh and like Virginia Tech some years and all those kinds of schools. How have those rivalries been as you've left at the time the Big East and moved into the Big 12? You're maintaining those pretty strong, it looks like.
Yeah, when we first left the Big East to the Big 12, we lost a lot of those games. But our ADs, Shane Lyons, the one who just left back in a few months ago, and then the one before him, Oliver Luck, both make concerted efforts because they have to travel so much for the conference games. They wanted to get our non-conference games as close to home as possible, and at the same time get some of our rivals back on the schedule. So they were able to kind of kill 2 birds with one stone, as they say. Hopefully the PETA people don't come after me for saying that. But anyway.
No, I got you.
No, it's an old. I don't know if that's a saying here in West Virginia, but anyway, kill two birds with one stone by getting both more regional games that require less travel, and also you get your rivals back on the schedule at the same time. Now, what's not ideal is having two of them in the same season, and what's not ideal is this will be the third year in a row we have started on the road against one of those teams. It was Maryland, then Virginia Tech, or I'm sorry, Maryland, then Pitt, and now this year it'll be Penn State.
So obviously no one wants to start on the road at rivalry games like that many years in a row. You have to be enthused then as a West Virginia person at some of the, so obviously we're giving you Cincinnati. That's a closer game. Mm-hmm. Central Florida is at least the same time zone. I don't actually know if mileage, if that's any closer than some of the.
It's about the same as Iowa State. It's within 100 miles of Iowa State, but
so that's okay.
It's better.
Let's talk about the ACC falling apart, though. Can we eventually steal Pittsburgh?
I hope so. I'd love it.
Because that would help. That would be y'all's rival to come in the same way. Right. Like Houston and Tech may turn into a natural rival, or Houston and UCF. Actually, there's some stuff there too. I think there'll be some Dana bad blood for West Virginia for a little bit, but that'll eventually go away because he can't coach forever. I feel like until Cincinnati added some geography there, y'all were kind of on an island. What was life like on that island?
I mean, it as a fan, it was I don't want to say it was tough, but it was definitely different. I mean, we love the Big 12. We're glad we're in the Big 12, and we feel like we're in a stable conference right now. I was talking to someone earlier that, a lot of West Virginia fans have clamored for the ACC. We didn't get in, and it's turned out to be a blessing in disguise now, probably, that we didn't. But it's not the same when you're playing teams halfway across the country. We fit in well culturally with the Big 12, but you just can't get as excited about playing a team that's 1,000 miles away than a team that's 75 miles away. It's just not the same.
Yeah,
it's hard. Rivalries felt forced. They call the Iowa State game the Riot Bowl. We don't. I mean, I don't know about Iowa State fans, but us West Virginia fans have never considered Iowa State a rival. We've had some really good games with them, but we don't consider them a rival. I mean, I guess they did that because they were our closest conference opponent, but it felt forced. So it is different, and it is nice as a fan to have those games on the schedule again. It really is. It's so much more excitement going into the season, so much buildup,
Yeah,
for these regional games.
So, I'm sure we'll talk more between now on either show, frankly, between now and that it's mid-October, right, that we end up playing one another. Mm-hmm. But between now and then, you're covering West Virginia, the Big 12, that whole region of the world. Where can people find you and your work, Couz?
Yeah, I'm on YouTube primarily at Couz's Corner. You can see my name there, Couz, and it's COUZ''S Corner for those that are watching. And then I do have some stuff on podcast platforms as well: Apple, Spotify, Amazon. Your normal podcast networks. And then if you want to interact with me on Twitter, I'm at Couz, COUZ206. If you want to interact with me there as well.
For sure, man. And frankly, it's a fun. If you're trying to get acquainted with the conference, it's as good a West Virginia voice as I'll think you'll find. You can find me, as always, at Painsworth 512, Parker Ainsworth, Painsworth, PAINSWRTH 512 on Twitter, Instagram. I have a TikTok. I'm not that active on it, but all your favorite social media resources. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Thank you for coming on today, Couz. It's fun. No, let's compete this fall. Let's have a good one. I'm excited to get into the conference, get to play guys like yourself. So thank you.
Absolutely. And real quick, I'd be remiss if I didn't also. I also have a basketball channel as well called Hoops from the Hills that I do with a partner of mine. So check that out too, please.
Well, and we will certainly be talking about Kelvin Sampson and Bob Huggins in basketball.
Absolutely. Yes, we're excited to have you guys in the league.
Definitely. Sure. So, and we wrap up as always by saying, "Go Cougs, go Cougs."